Hi, welcome to this special Reclaim the Frame, Raise Hell, the Life and Times of Molly Ivins event, the spectacularly prescient and incredibly inspiring film about Molly Ivins, who is one of the greatest and I think personally most inspirational political commentators and thinkers of modern times. And we are going to get into that discussion with Janice and Carla, the director and the producer, who I will ask to introduce themselves shortly. So for those of you who don't know us, I run Bird's Eye View, and we are a mission to bring ever greater audiences to films by women. This qualifies on all levels as a Reclaim the Flame plus. It's about a woman, and it's absolutely pretty much 100% by women. And we are going to get into why this film was made and how the film was made, and also fascinating because the film came out last year but is coming out this year just before the US election, so even the kind of context and the conversation around the film will have changed for the filmmakers, and I've talked to them in the previously, and they are really firing on all cylinders and channeling the spirit of Molly. So before we get into that, I'd just like to say please share comments and put them in the chat, and questions please. We'll have talk between us, and then we will come to sharing your comments or your questions. So this actually, we're coming live from London, Los Angeles, and Texas. So this is a truly international conversation. So first of all, welcome Janice and Carla. Janice, if you could introduce yourself, just tell us the audience a little bit about yourself, not just the fact that you directed the film, but who is Janice Engel?
Hi, I am Janice Engel. How y'all doing? I originally hail from New York. I live in Los Angeles. I have for 40 plus years. I make documentary films. I'm a professor. I've been a showrunner for docuseries and nonfiction programming in my previous lifetime. I, went back to doing what I love most, which is making stories and telling stories, filming stories about real life, real stories, and real people. That's, to me, is a gateway into sharing, so much. It's also about curiosity, and I'm always curious. So I like to say I fell backwards into documentaries the way Molly fell backwards into journalism. It just was.
Thank you, Janice. Carla, welcome from Texas.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carla Vandervort, and I'm one of the producers on the film. I'm in Houston, Texas, and it's very exciting these days in Texas because everybody's turning out for early voting. Harris County, the town that I live in, has had over 100,000 early voters almost every day since we've had early voting, which is astounding and very exciting. And I think Molly would be proud of what's going on in her hometown, because Molly Ivins was from my town, Houston, Texas, and I can really relate to a lot of what Molly was and what she talked about. So that's one of the reasons why I was excited to be a part of the team that made the film.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's wind back let's start with how you both discovered Molly. So Janice, start with you.
So I discovered Molly by not knowing who she was, which I'll admit before y'all and God, she's listening. I didn't know who Molly was. I grew up in New York. I went to California, to Los Angeles to go to film school way back in the dinosaur era. And so she wasn't really on my radar. I had heard of her because she had dubbed George W. Bush Shrub the Little Bush. And I think I'd seen her in the late 90s on like a Letterman, but I really didn't know who she was until our third producing partner, James Egan, gave me a call. He and I wanted to make a film together for a while, and he called me up in spring of 2012 and told me I needed to go see this play called Red Hot Patriot, the kick-ass wit of Molly Ivins. And I paused and I said, why? And he said, I had to last week. And he knew the playwrights, and so the Engel sisters, same last name as mine, and the caveat, the carrot, was that it starred Kathleen Turner, which I said, wow, okay. So I bought a ticket. I went. I sat third row, slightly off center, and I laughed my ass off the entire time. Kathleen was great, but the material of Molly that she wrote and her own voice, and they had little clips. It was astounding. I came home and I Googled her till 2 or 3 in the morning, woke up, I called James and I said, wow, she's amazing. How come I don't know about her? And he said, I don't know about her either. He's from Baltimore. I mean, she wasn't on our radar. So, and he had gone backstage and talked to Kathleen and one of the playwrights, the sisters that he knew, and nothing had been done. Nothing had been done on her except for the play. And so he and I just said, we have to do this. We have to reach out to the gatekeepers, which we did through the playwrights, and got in touch with Molly's chief of staff, Betsy Moon, who put us in touch with Dan Green, Molly's manager. They all IMDb'd us, said, oh, they're for real. They know what they're doing. And literally within a matter of, I think, 2 weeks, maybe, we had a green light from her estate. But within all of this time, James and I knew pretty early on that we couldn't do this without a bona fide Texan. And we both had a mutual friend. It's like instantly, we both said, Carlisle. And I think I said, she deserves this. So I'm going to throw it to Car. Go, girl.
Janice and James called me up and they gang pressed me. They said, you have 4 to 8 hours to say yes. So I called them back the next morning. I said, I'm in. And I was very excited. I knew who Molly was. I'd never seen her live, but I certainly had read her and I knew who she was. And I had known Janice and James at that point for about 25 years. And so we had a great relationship together, all of us, and we trusted each other. And you got to have trust when you're going to embark on a film project or any project, but a film project that's a documentary that's going to take some time. And so I was really excited about being involved in this. And, I said, why me? And they said, well, we need a native Texan. But what I began to understand was they needed somebody that knew how to talk Texan to the oil and gas people in Houston and around Texas, where we were going to be looking to raise money from. And I, like Molly, was raised in the oil and gas, in an oil and gas family. And so I had a sense of how to talk to those people. And within a matter of weeks, Janice was in town and we were on our way to Austin, and we did our first 6 interviews and raised a bunch of money and cut a sizzle. So that's how it started. A sizzle being a teaser film that we could then take out for further fundraising.
So that's interesting. So can you talk about where you got that initial investment from? Because obviously with documentaries, it's tricky. You have to take, especially in the US, you have to take private investment often to get it going. But it sounds potentially like the people that you're raising money from wouldn't necessarily be fans of Molly. So can you tell us why? Like, why were they interested? Because it kind of sounds almost counterintuitive to get funding from that place. So talk, for those people who don't know about film finance, especially in the US, like talk us through that process, because it's a fine line, isn't it?
Yes. It really is.
Are you good with that?
What's that?
Are you good with me answering at this moment?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Okay. So in regards to Texas, you're right, Mia. It would seem counterproductive. And we tried to get foundational money while we were from Texas foundations, but we were told Molly was too political. So we were going around to private citizens who, even though Molly might write about them or some of the ideas that they were upholding, she was a hometown star. She was a state star. People loved her writing, and people were proud of her. So they were like, okay, I'm interested in doing something on Molly. We also went around to Molly's friends. And so we got Molly's family, we got Molly's friends, we got Molly's colleagues, we might've gotten Molly's frenemies, and we just went around and that's how we raised some money. But actually at the beginning, Janice and James and I all pulled out our credit cards. So we started with the credit cards, and then now Janice, take it away.
Well, we ponied up $10K between the 3 of us, and that's what kicked it off. And then, one of the first things I did in making a documentary film is, because it's a long, hard road to finding, one of the biggest challenges is finding the money. And so we wanted to have, a fiscal sponsor so we could get tax deductible donations. Makes a huge difference word to anyone making a doc and get fiscal sponsorship or create a 501c3. So we did. We immediately, I was a member of the International Documentary Association, the IDA, which is global these days. And we applied for fiscal sponsorship and we got it pretty quick. And that allowed people to make, donations. And so for a period of time, we had donations, having a funding cut. I called it a funding cut first because it wasn't really a sizzle. Sizzles are short. It was a way to garner interest. Carlisle and I did the Janice and Carr dog and pony show. We went all around. We had friends create parties for us. We did, little mini screenings of the funding cut. When we did our first fundraiser, which was during the interviewing of the first 6 interviews, we did it in Jim Hightower's office, which is literally a church. And we invited a bunch of people. Carla, we had Molly's friends. We had one door opened, another door opened. Molly was so beloved. And when people heard we were doing this, they were so ecstatic that finally somebody is doing this and her voice will be heard. And so it just created a really nice ripple. And people came in that first fundraiser, literally, I'd say a month and a half after James and I really started and I came out and Carr and I hit the road. We did our first fundraiser and we raised $17K. So it was extraordinary. That was extraordinary. So that gave us a real boost. We were like, wow. Of course, that's not. That is like, okay. It took us 6.5 years. Around year 5, in 2014, we started talking about it. We launched a Kickstarter. No, it was let me reframe that. That was year 4. We did a Kickstarter in 2015, year 3, actually, 2015, and it was enormously successful. And what we did was we reached out to Molly's beloveds all across the country. We built up our social media we started, and then we brought on a friend who was Gerald Jagoda, social media darling, to help us with her former partner, Gretchen. And we were able to raise over $126,000 on Kickstarter for a documentary, which is extraordinary. But it's all about having you have to have your social media outreach going to really get that happening. And Molly had a constituency and we tapped into it. And we are very, very blessed. It was absolutely astounding. So all in all, we did a lot of fundraising, lots of parties, lots of getting out the word. We had friends, I had people come up to me hearing I was doing it and give me, in Carlisle too, in the palm of our hand, $2. We raised between $2 to $25,000 in donations in this for over 5 years, and I would put it in my pocket and then take it right to the bank. So, yeah, that's what we did.
That is dedication. And so, what were the other barriers to making this film? Was it too political, a hot potato for some of the legitimate film funders?
Well, yeah, it was for foundations. I mean, in the States, there's lots of foundations and you can apply for arts organizations often apply to get foundations for particular projects. And people just kept saying to us, this is too political. This is too political. It also happened to be, we started the film during the run up to the 2016 elections. And then after that, the 2018 midterm elections. So the people that we thought at least I thought we might be able to get money from here in Houston and around Texas, we were unable to because they were all putting their money behind candidates. And so, as Janice said, the Kickstarter really helped, the $2 in cash to $20K. It was really fantastic. Aside from money, one of the things we really wanted to have was we wanted to make sure that this was not a Democratic polemic, or a liberal polemic. And so we wanted to try and get some Republicans of note. And we tried to get President George W. Bush. We tried to get Governor Rick Perry, who Molly tagged Governor Good Hair because he had amazing hair, to interview, and they wouldn't do it. And so that was one of the challenges but I actually found one summer, I went out to LA to stay with Janice and help for a month. And Janice said, Carr, do a deep dive on the internet and find me some footage I haven't seen yet. And I found some footage of Molly. The footage Mia in the film were Molly's, obviously, the next day after a bad bender, and she's so mad about President Clinton signing away the Poverty Act, in which it's about his political life is versus taking care of the kids. And she says, I'm not voting. And I said to Janice, you know what? This is it. We don't need a Republican. Here's Molly right now, dissing the Democratic political candidate who used to call her for advice. And so for us, that was one of the challenges, is to make sure that the film was balanced. And Janice weigh in next.
So, yeah, that was always hard, because you don't want to have a hagiography, and this isn't a hagiography, because Molly goes after everybody. She equally skewers. Yep. And that piece of footage, raw footage, it's literally called raw, and Molly was raw. She was really angry, and yeah, she was real. So that was great. The other thing was, I had connections from when I had been a showrunner, and I went to certain media companies, and we had a really good funding cuts, long sizzle, and a great pitch, and I got back a similar response from several, which was, "We love Molly. Oh my God, Molly Ivins!" And then their teams of development looked at it, and it came back basically, it's dead. She's dead, and it's a biopic. And I was like, what? And it was such a limited way of thinking. But, look, we started in 2012. Obama had been reelected. And there was a kind of, I don't want to say arrogance, but yeah, maybe that's what it is. So, not realizing where this was going. What I will say is that haunted me, and it also James, because we'd been in the business for a while, and so suddenly biopic and she's dead became like, oh my God. So I started to rethink my structure. I went down wormholes. That's all part of the creative process. How am I going to tell the story? And it is biopic. And then RBG came out. But what's interesting is that, films and making anything creative has its own life, breath, and process. And you have to let it have its way with you. And this was Molly's ride. It's not my ride. It's not Carlisle's ride. It's Molly. There's no doubt that Molly's driving this bus. Every time we push to want to get it out, as Car said, we started in 2012, we worked on it. And at 2016, we thought, okay, we're going to have it ready. The average time for a documentary film is 7.5 years or 7 years. And so we were still like under, it would have been buried in 2016. Thank God it wasn't ready. 2018, it comes, it was 101 congresswomen were elected. And a week after that, we found out. We were in Sundance, and I said, "Ooh, Molly's driving this bus." It was every time we would get little signposts. I got many signposts, but the biggest that one was the getting into Sundance a week after the 101 freshman women were elected. The next biggest one was after we got into Sundance, South by, won Audience Awards. We were in a bunch of film festivals. We got picked up by Magnolia Pictures. They told us in July, and thank God we were out in 2019. My heart goes out to filmmakers right now who are really struggling in 2020. In 2019, in July, Magnolia sends us when they're going to roll out the film. And they said, we're going to do it in August at some point, and we'll give you the specific date. The specific date was August 30th. And I'm looking at that date, and nobody said anything. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, oh my God, August 30th, 2019 was Molly Ivins' 75th birthday. I called Magnolia and I said, how'd you pick this date? They said, we talked to the people who are going to be exhibiting at different theaters. That's the date that, in terms of before Labor Day, it's going to be perfect. And I said, well, you don't know how perfect it is. And come on, it's her 75th birthday and the film rolls out in the great state of Texas. You tell me who's driving the bus. So, and here we are, leading in the run-up to the most important election in our lifetime. If you're an American, this is the most important election in your life, except for maybe during World War II. If you're if you're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
This is a decisive vote for democracy. And here we are rolling out in the UK in the lead up to that election.
Mm-hmm.
Molly, she's pushing it.
Mm-hmm. And Carla, this Molly has really inspired you, but you're heavily politicized because of the process of making this film. I mean, maybe you were before, but it sounded like you went up a rung.
I certainly got more involved, and a couple of weeks ago, I got invited to be part of the official Harris County mail-in ballot voter signature verification team. So I was actually partnered with a Republican, and we both had monitors, and we would see people's ballots come up. And we were looking at the signature on their mail-in ballot and on the envelope that the ballot goes into. And in the middle of that, I was really overwhelmed, and I thought, oh my God, this is democracy in action. And I'm on the front lines because I'm looking at people's ballots. So yes, I mean, definitely, very much so. And I will also say, I have been a long time gay activist, and I was particularly active during the 90s. And when I lived in Los Angeles. And Molly was a civil rights activist. And so there's definitely, a corollary for me with Molly and being an activist that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So yeah, it's very important to me. And as I say, there's a lot of Molly that rings true with me. I mean, I was laughing because I was thinking, okay, like Molly says in the film, I hunt, I fish, I drink beer, I have a gun, I had a pickup truck, I'm a liberal, so what? So
wonderful. And Janice, how has just being in Molly's world for so long inspired you, like in both your life and creatively? Because it feels to me, watching it as a creative person there and as an activist, a cultural activist, that there's just so much to take away from Molly's, the way that she lived life, the way that she approached the how to use her voice. There's just so much in it. So yeah, you must have got a lot of juice from this orange.
Oh, I mean, I got juice from the moment I saw that play. So much of what she said is so true, and just brilliantly funny. Speaking truth to power, especially as a woman. I never had problems speaking truth to power. My father was a type A, very, very charismatic takeover, and I had no problem speaking up to him. But in work and in business, I really saw the fearlessness that she had. And she didn't worry so much about pissing people off.
Yeah.
And really, to make change, you gotta ruffle feathers. You have to be who you are. Here's the thing. You have to be who you are. She was a 6 foot tall, big boned woman. And, as a kid, it drove her crazy. And she felt like, a Clydesdale amongst thoroughbreds. I love that. She was, a big boned girl in a time of, debutantes. And even though she was beautiful, she really was beautiful. But I get it. Anybody who's ever felt like you don't fit in, like you don't, you're outside. And I've always felt like that. So right from the get-go, I so related to her. I also had, like I said, a father. My father was not like Jim Ivins, but I had no problem speaking up and speaking back to him. And so it took me all these many years till I got to Molly's project to really, truly find and stick to that voice and to be able to not be afraid to speak my truth, but not just my truth, other people's truths. How can we, come together? Molly, her big thing was she used that spear of truth to stand up for those who don't have a voice. And in unfolding and digging into her life, I realized I'd always been doing that too. So I found lots and lots of parallels that just made me embrace that much more of who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very grateful for that. She gave me a certain fearlessness. And also to, even when you're in your wormhole and you can't find your way out, you have to have patience and you have to persevere. You cannot let go of, what that initial spark was.
Mm-hmm.
And Raise Hell really allowed me the room and the space to, with all the uphills and downhills, to really imbibe that.
Mm-hmm.
And now and create Raise Hell. What a process, and what an amazing voice to share. She share with the world. I mean, so she won't be forgotten, because she does. I've said that this film, Molly's so relevant now. She's probably more relevant than when she was alive, because things are that much worse.
Yeah. Carla, can we come back to the outsider point, actually, because this comes up so frequently in the film, but particularly in her early years. What Janice said about her physicality and how much that marked her out, but actually then became her kind of defining feature in many ways. She used her rather big status the personality grew into that frame in a way, right? Especially in a way that a woman's like that is supposed to disappear, and she didn't. So can you talk a bit more about that side of it, and maybe also how you may relate to that yourself?
Well, I guess I grew up in an oil and gas family, and I too, like Molly, went to debutante parties, and I went to the same school that Molly went to. And so I understand that world that she came from, and she understood that she needed to get at that point in time, she had to get a master's to be able to take herself somewhere in the work world. And she just worked with that. And one of the great things is she, because of her size, she would just hold court with all the men in the Texas legislature, which is where she really got her first taste of or I wouldn't say taste, but recognition. National recognition is when she was writing about what was going on in the Texas legislature. And part of it was that she could drink as much as the guys. And so she could hang in there and listen to what they had to say. And now that's not anything I can do, but the outsider status, I will say, does allow one to have or at least for me, I could step back and listen and take in things and have a sense of what I perceive is the truth that's going on. And like Janice, through this film, I've certainly found a voice for myself, that I definitely speak up about things and am way more myself than I ever have been, and authenticity. And that's one of the things I also found very inspiring about Molly, was she was who she was, and she cared about what she cared about, and she wrote about it, and she told people about that. Mm-hmm. And I think she managed to do that and retain an outsider status. But to be able to do those things, I think she had to have the outsider status, so she wasn't wondering if I'm going to piss somebody off. They're not going to let me in that club if I talk about that. She didn't care. She didn't want to be in those clubs. She had been raised to be in those clubs. She knew what that life was like, and she chose something differently.
Yep.
Did that address what you wanted to?
Yep.
Okay. Right.
Can we also talk about the wit, because it's just, it's just unbelievable. What appears to often be off the cuff, one imagines that some of it was thought about, but just, let's just center that, because just the woman's wit was just like exemplary, and boy, did that open doors and close as many. And wow.
Well, Molly was a satirist. She used satire. She ridicule. She knew how to use ridicule. And she used it against those who were in power, those who had signed up. You sign up for a public role, you are fair game. And she went for them. And what she didn't like, she went after people like Rush Limbaugh, was when you go after those who don't have a voice and you use them as bait to make fun of. And that's when satire, she said, is vulgar. And Molly was always funny. She always, even as a kid, her mother had a great wit, which I found out in going through her papers and stuff. So the humor was in the family. Her father didn't have much of a sense of humor, but I think also Molly had that in her from reading, and I just think it was in her. She was funny. How she looked at the world. She had a wry way of looking at the world. And I also think because of, her history and her background, but her take on the world, because look at how she looked at herself. I do think the outsider status is what nurtured that sense of humor. It's armor. The funniest people, you always look at comedians, look at a lot of them probably were outsiders as kids. You use humor as a shield and also a way as a spear to deflect. And she had mastery. She had mastery. She was so funny. She was Twitter ready back in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. She really could let it rip. Newt Gingrich, the dope smoking deadbeat dad who divorced his dying wife. Alliteration, brilliant, funny, spot on. I'm not anti-gun, I'm pro-knife. And then her whole column, if you read the column, is all about the merits of the knife, but it's really about, how many guns do you really need? Sure, she had a shotgun like Carlisle, she hunted, but it was at the time of concealed carry. Can you believe that? Concealed carry. Now it's like America's like the Wild West. So she just was a wordsmith and just naturally funny, her take on life. And, I think having that sense of humor, being able to laugh at life is a great way to live. She said, you have to, have fun while you're fighting for freedom because it might get to be the only fun you ever had. And you have to remember to laugh. You have to remember to laugh because otherwise, you contract. We close in on ourselves. And Molly was about sharing, open. Mm-hmm. She called herself a progressive populist.
Mm-hmm. The other thing about Molly's wit was she did have that understanding that humor is a way to get to people. Right. Not just to needle them, but it's also a way for people to listen, to possibly, penetrate their closedness if they're laughing about it. And if you can laugh at yourself, you might be able to identify, oh yeah, I kind of do that. I'm going to see what she's really talking about here because I can see myself in that, which is great.
Yeah, it brings people to the table, and she knew that. You get people to unlock that, as Jim Hightower said, Molly knew that humor was the door key to the brain. You unlock that little door to get people to actually listen to you. Because once you laugh, you relax. Mm-hmm. Endorphins get released, you've relaxed, you feel pretty good about yourself, and then you actually have the ability to listen mm-hmm. to each other.
Mm-hmm. Also, her seeming need to not be liked. She didn't, it seems that, because that can be debilitating, that she didn't actually care what people thought. It was more important to say what needed to be said. And, again, that's such an important point too. Can you pick up on that perhaps? Her bravura sensibility.
Well, here's the thing. You have the outer personality. They used to call her, there was the professional Molly and the private Molly. Right. And the professional Molly was who you saw, could sling, one-liners, could debate anybody from a president to, a triple PhD. She was that brilliant. She was a bookworm. She read everything. The private Molly was actually quite shy mm-hmm. and retreating. And I think that she had a very, very close, big posse of people who loved her, but really close friends. But she was an alcoholic. high functioning, but a hardcore alcoholic, and that is isolating, and she had those moments of isolation. People knew. Here's the thing, Molly, she and Ann Richards, Ann got sober way before she did, but they used to call it drunk school. They used to go and dry out at drunk school at Betty Ford or different places, Rancho La Puerta, clean up, stop smoking, but always fall back into it. Ann cleaned up and got sober much earlier, and many years later actually paid for her intervention, the final one, which stuck. But that private part is a lonely place. And it's in some of her writings. I did reveal some of the journal entries and little bits and pieces that I found. There is a box at the Briscoe Center where her papers are housed, the Briscoe Center for American Studies at the University of Texas, Austin. There was a box that's sealed for, I think it's 50 years after her death. And I'm sure in that box is probably, I imagine, her recovery papers. And she wanted to wait till everybody who she knew was past that she didn't want to hurt anybody. I mean, that was Molly, biggest heart in the world. In fact, she was known as Aunt Moll to everybody's friends, their kids. She paid for all her nieces and nephews to go to college, friends, kids to go to college. She was the most generous person. Big, big heart. Big, big heart.
And Carla, just picking up on that point actually that Janice just made about something off limits, were there any other challenges when you're telling a real person story and a lot of the nearest and dearest people who care are still alive and therefore have a view on how you're going to tell the story and why even you're telling the story? Were there any other like points at which you kind of faced a bit of a moral dilemma, or how did you involve those people who had a real emotional attachment to Molly?
Well, people were anxious. We were going to talk about Molly's alcoholism.
Right.
And some people did not want us to, but we also knew that then it would be a hagiography, and we had to talk about Molly's alcoholism. When we spoke with her family members and her friends and her colleagues, I don't really think anybody said, I'm not willing to talk about that. People were once they understood that we were the real deal and we were not in there to, what is the word I'm looking for? Sensationalize it. Because when we started, Molly had only been dead for 5 years. And so they were all still, their feelings were still very tender. They didn't have enough time away. And so once they realized we weren't going to sensationalize her, then they were very willing to open up to us. And Janice is a fantastic interviewer. And I was on a lot of those shoots. And Janice is a great way of drawing people out and getting them comfortable. And then they would tell us great stories. And I don't really feel like there weren't things that we heard, no, forget it. We did have some, it took us a while to get Molly's brother, Andy Ivins, on film. And then one day, this is like the classic Molly's driving the bus. Then one day he literally picks up the phone and calls Janice and he says, are you going to be in Texas in the next few months? And she says, well, Andy, yes, I am. And so it worked out. And then 10 weeks later, he died. So, right.
It was 3 weeks after we did his interview. He actually, I was in Texas and he called up. I've been trying to find him for a year, reaching out through every channel. And all of a sudden,
I have a stepsister that's really good friends with his now widow, but is good friends with his wife. And even through my stepsister, we could not get to Andy.
And one day the phone rings and it's this man's voice and he says, well, I hear you've been looking for me. I said, Andy Ivins, I have been looking for you. I've been going up we've been trying to find you. And he said, you want to talk to me? I said, yeah. He said, come on down to the ranch. And I came with my dear friend, Dave Everts. It was he and I on the road for 10 days. We must have shot, I think we did 10 interviews. We went from all the way across Texas to New Mexico. Just getting friends. This was the friends and family shoot. And we stayed for 2 days on the ranch, the Ivins Ranch, which Andy and Molly bought together. Just Andy and Carla, his wife, their daughter, they were lovely and hosted us. And Andy gave me a 3-hour interview, and 3 weeks later, he died. 64. He had cancer, but the chemo is what.
Wow.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Wow.
So, like I said, people didn't refuse us, except for the Republicans. You know, people didn't refuse us. It was just the right time. We weren't in charge of the timing.
Mm-hmm. So the film came out last year and was a really considerable hit. Congratulations! And I'm talking about the US, your home territory. So talk us through the experience of getting it out last year first, because of course now we're talking about the UK release, and the whole context has, the fervor and the fever pitch has got even.
Oh my God, we had such a good time. So Magnolia, our distributor in the States, decided to open it up right before our Labor Day weekend, which is right at the end of August, beginning of September. So Janice and I were in town in August for a pre-opening kickoff. And Janice stayed in Austin and I went back to Houston, and we had simultaneous, and one of our fabulous angel investors is from Dallas. So she was handling the Dallas opening night. So the three of us were on stage introducing the film with various people that Molly knew, and then doing a Q&A afterwards. And it was, sold out. It sold out for weeks all over Texas. For weeks. It was going to be at my local theater in Houston for a week, and it was wound up being there for 4 weeks. Wow. And this is kind of what happened all over the States. And we would hear from Facebook, how do I get to see this film? I live in such and such a town, such and such a town. And I would call up James and I'd say, what do you think? And he said, tell them to go to the art theater in their small town that programs RBG or some other film like that and ask for it. And that's what would happen. And then Janice and James, they were doing the California. I'm going to zoom in, or I'm going to go to different theaters in Northern California and do, on a live intro or outro or Q&A. And we would also call up, all of us would call up the small theaters and say, how can we support you? And they're so not used to hearing from answering the phone, the theater manager hearing, I'm a producer of a film that's going to be at your theater in a month, and we would really love to support you in this. What do you need from us? They were astounded by that. So they got so excited that, here we were. And I also know that Magnolia did not expect that the ground team of Janice, James, and Carlisle were really going to push for what we did promotions wise. And so it was lots of fun to do that. And we heard it went from Alabama to Alaska to Maine, and people were loving it.
18 weeks it was in theaters. The lead up, though, to getting it into theaters was equally as insane. Once we found out we were in November of 2018, we got a call from Sundance. I was in this room right behind where I'm standing right now. My editor and a guy said, hi, this is John from from Sundance. And I think I scribbled down Sun, and I went running in programming Sun. And I ran in here, and I put him on speaker, and I started saying, I'm going to say holy like 5 times. And they said, oh my God, I just said, he said, that's fine. And my dogs, we had one of our dogs, but was barking, and Mo, my editor, we were jumping up and down like 2 little girls. We just won, like the lottery. And it was pretty astounding. And then 3 days later, we found out we were in South by, and this was in November, and Sundance we had to have our DCP at Sundance like January 20th, and it was November 18th, and I locked picture on December 17th, and we had over 1,400 clips that needed to be cleared in the film and get everything ready. It was round the clock. It was absolute insanity. Plus, we only had, when we found out we were in both festivals, we had $12,000 in the bank, and we had to find a couple of angels, and they came through in a matter of 2 days. One made a decision in an hour and a half after seeing what I would call a very, very tight, nearly a fine cut, rough cut.
A fellow Texan, our Texas angel.
A fellow Texan, Katie Bettner. And it was absolutely astounding. And then another friend's friend came on, and the two of them were just helped us across that finish line, along with some other nonprofits and family foundations via them. And so that was incredible. And by the time we hit Sundance, I think I barely slept. It was insane. Then South by, and then we were at numerous film festivals. We won awards. I actually got vertigo between Sundance and South by. It was like, fallout. It happens to filmmakers.
It was great. At South by Southwest, it was so much fun because we were bringing the hometown hero home.
Yeah.
And we had they originally had programmed us on this off night, this kind of lame theater, and then they were like, no, we're going to give you a daytime slot in the right big theater. It was wall-to-wall people. There were people in line. Janice was back in the green room talking to some of the guests, and I had all the tickets for the people that we'd interviewed. So I was walking the line, handing out the tickets to our guests, and people were seeing each other that hadn't seen each other since Molly's memorial service, and they were reconnecting, and it was just so great. I mean, it was fun, and we probably had 17 people in the audience in Austin that we'd interviewed. So that was fantastic to actually have, Molly's friends see it in Austin, in the hometown, and Cecile Richards introduced the film, and she's in the film, and that was so great, again, for Austin. And we won the audience award at South by Southwest. And so the run-up to getting, opening nationally was a lot of fun. As Janice says, she and I did a lot of film festivals, and she and James did a lot of film festivals. We definitely were tag teaming. And again, I don't think Magnolia realized what they had in the three of us, that we were going to fight for our film all the way.
In the spirit of Molly. We have some questions and some comments, actually. So let's start with the question. Simon Barrow says, it's difficult not to think if only she was around today. How do you think Molly, who often described herself as a populist, would have dealt with responding to the Trump phenomenon? This is a big question. Janice.
She was Twitter ready way back in the day. She'd be skewering him. She'd be dining out on him for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she would have been continuously pricking at him. She does, nobody, when Molly was doing what she did, there was political satire, but not in the likes of how Molly does it. That's what we have now. Whenever I would go around and I would ask people who's the next Molly Ivins, they'd always point to, the comedians. They'd always say John Oliver, you have Samantha Bee, you have, Jon Stewart when he was doing his show, and Stephen Colbert and Trevor Noah now. I mean, these are the Molly Ivins, but Molly was a deep journalist as well. So she did all her, all the investigative work. The comedians have writers' rooms. So, I think that Molly would have been very, very popular on Twitter. And I think she'd be, on one of the, the echo chambers, although she had a lot to say about the echo chamber that we see of the round table of, CNN. For the Brits, we have CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. That's, and it's, you only hear what you want to hear. It's kind of like the internet, it's all programmed for what you want to hear instead of getting a fair and balanced sense of what it used to be. Molly used to be, she did something they tried to do Crossfire back in the day, and pair her with PJ O'Rourke. So it would be, point, counterpoint. So, that sort of stuff went on back then. But she saw it heading in this direction. And she talked about the echo chamber that we see right now and the danger of it. But she would be on the front line going after him. She would be penning. She'd be writing a column, no doubt. She'd probably be, or on the internet, and everybody could read her column. She probably would have gone, I would think, definitely over the pond. Her wit, you guys get her wit. Mm-hmm. Completely. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think that she was a First Amendment warrior. You know, she left her estate, half of her estate, to the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union.
Wow.
She was a First Amendment warrior. And she was very, very important for her that everybody has a right to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a right to speak. Even Sadie, my dog.
Even dogs.
Yeah, no, she say the Klan, when they went to come and protest in Austin, and it's in the film, you know, they had a right to come there and speak, but then the other side had a right to protest it, and they did. I won't give it away what they did, but it's wildly hilarious, and it's very Molly Ivins. Mm-hmm. Now you have to see the film.
Mm-hmm. A couple of other comments. So Simone Glover said, I didn't know anything about Molly till I saw this wonderful film. What an amazing woman. Thank you both for bringing her to this Brit's attention. And then similarly, Mel Bestel says, I love everything about this film. I can't wait until my kids are old enough to watch it. I want them to grow up with Molly Ivins' energy. On that note, have you done educational screenings? Like, how are you? Yeah, have you got it out to a younger generation?
Oh, yeah, last week I was on a panel for the law school for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And it was fantastic. It was a bunch of law students. They also have a journalism school and a communication school. So it was the J school, the comm school, and the law school. And a bunch of an amazing panel of accomplished lawyers and politicians, all women. So we have a Magnolia placed our film with a company here in the States called Swank Films, and they put it into college campuses. Right. And so, yes, and from the get-go, Janice and James and I wanted an educational component. So it could be, you know, used in J schools or film schools, however it might be. So people studying political science, you know, so it could be used that way. And then the other thing I want to say about the comment about I can't wait till my kids grow up is one of the wonderful things that I saw and I heard from people in Houston was, I've seen it a second time and I'm going back to see it a third time. I'm bringing my kids and my grandkids. You know, they're old enough and they need to see this. They need to know who Molly was. We're going into an election, and this was 2019. They were like, you know, the election's coming and I want my kids and grandkids to understand what's at stake here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to add to that. So yes, we got hit in terms of educational outreach. We've got hit by the pandemic. So that put things a little, I was supposed to be going to Berkeley. I was supposed to be going to Ohio. I teach also. So I teach up in San Francisco. So I fly up there. They were going to fly me to other places. It hasn't happened. I'm actually very happy to be home and teaching virtually. And I've been, like Carla did, zooming into things. But I had an amazing experience with kids. And I will say, how old are your kids? Because the opening in Austin that we had.
That's a great story, man.
We had two little girls. So I always take questions after the film. And a little girl raised her hand. And she wanted to know what advice would Molly Ivins give to her. And I asked her name. Her name was Ruby, and she was 10 years old, almost 11. And I said, Molly would, tell you to, be true to yourself, stand up for others, who are being bullied, but to always, speak up for yourself and always be truthful, speak truth. And I said one other thing. And she was so taken by this, and she and her bestie were there, and she was so self-possessed. I took a picture in the lobby with them. They were cute. They were 10. Yeah, they were 10 and 9. And her mother wrote me the next morning, and I said, "Can I film them?" And I filmed them, and they did some answers and Q&As for me. They were just, especially Ruby. And her mother, through social media, contacted me the next morning and said that Ruby has been up all morning and she's been kind of laying out and doing all this cutting and drawing. And I asked her what she's doing, and she was basically laying out a newspaper for the first ever newspaper in her elementary school.
Wow.
Okay, 10 years old. So to is it Mel Bestel or about, yeah.
Yep.
Your children, they get it. They get Molly. I would say 11 and up, let them see it. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So I thought we've got 5 minutes left. I thought we need to bring Molly's voice in. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Listen to the people who are talking about how to fix what's wrong, not the ones who just work people into a snit over the problems. Listen to those who have ideas of how to fix things, not the ones who blame others. This feels very, very salient point across many levels and worldwide too. So in terms of like legacy of the film and just, what next for you? What next for the film? What else would you like to close with and tell the audience? What would you like to share?
For me, I think one of the things that I want to say to the women in particular, stop apologizing for being a woman. Because Molly never did that. And I think that's really important. What do I want with the film next? I want to continue to have the film go out to all sorts of people. I really was hoping we could have a Spanish version of this film. I thought that would be fabulous to have a Spanish version for Spanish citizens, non-citizens in the US. We were unable to do that. We didn't have the money for that. But I think it's important for anybody that's not even an American, but like y'all. I mean, democracy is at stake around the world. And this is important. Got to see what's important and how to fight it. And then I'll hand it off to Janice.
I would say that, first of all, I am, we're all really thrilled and moved that it's jumped the pond and that it's got, I really don't know any other recent documentary except for maybe RBG who has legs like this.
I mean, it is amazing, man. Every once in a while I'll stop myself and go, wow, what the hell just happened here?
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and that's because she is so relevant. The fact that I think it was absolutely brilliant of Modern Films and Eve Gabreau to pick us up. Thank you, but to bring it out now in the world, it is really, really the timing couldn't be more perfect. And the more people who see her and know who she is, the more it helps all those things that are basic rights for all of us. Our First Amendment rights, which is, everybody's rights, right to be who you are, and yes, I ditto to what Carla said to women. Stop apologizing. Mm-hmm. We have nothing to apologize for. Actually, they should be apologizing to us, frankly. And I just, what's going on in the world right now is an opportunity for all of us. This is a reset. Pandemics come along in history because it's a clean out of sorts. And it's an opportunity for all of us to find our own balance, but also to find our global balance. We are one species. The tribalism, Molly would be going crazy. The polarization, the tribalism, it has to stop. We are one species with one planet, and we're all in it together. And that's what she was so great about, that, we all must take responsibility. Nobody's going to fix this for us. No big daddy. Mm-hmm. Hello, no big daddy is going to fix it for you. Mm-hmm. It's up to we the people, but it's up to each of us to take responsibility, civic responsibility, and do what's possible, but also to be kind and to have fun, to laugh,
And as Molly said, it's when she said, keep fighting for freedom, it might be the only fun you have. She also said, and it's a better way to live. Mm-hmm. It absolutely is, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. A woman to that. I think that's a great place to end. Janice and Carla, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia.
Spending a beautiful hour with us. It's been wonderful talking to you. It's a really beautiful, important piece of work. And yeah, it's our pleasure to help get it out there. So for those of you who haven't seen it, Modern Films, and actually on the checkout, you can actually donate to a favorite cinema or an organization. So it's also, you're actually doing good with your dollars, or rather your pound, shillings and pence, as we say here in our different currency. So yeah, please see it, recommend the film to others. And yeah, Janice and Carla, thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.